Do you remember this transmission from the missing Quarian arc?
Repeating. This is the Ark Keelah Si'yah. The situation is not under control. Note and avoid until further updates. Repeating.
If you were ever curious to know why the arc warned others to stay away, you'll find the answer in the novel Mass Effect Andromeda: Annihilation. In this video, I'll tell you a bit about the book and then give recommendations on whether or not it's worth reading. For your convenience, this video is divided into chapters. The review section will contain spoilers for Annihilation and some light spoilers for the Mass Effect trilogy and Andromeda, so watch with caution. Mass Effect Andromeda: Annihilation, written by Catherynne M. Valente, is the third and final tie-in novel to Mass Effect Andromeda. It tells the story of a terrifying string of days aboard the Andromeda Initiative's Quarian ark, the Keelah Si'yah, on its journey to the Andromeda Galaxy. It's primarily told from the perspective of three characters: a Drell named Anax Therian, a Quarian named Senna'Nir, and an Elcor named Yorick. These three are among the members of Sleepwalker Team Blue 7, whose function, like the other Sleepwalker teams, is to be awakened from cryostasis at predetermined dates on the voyage to ensure the safety and security of the Ark and its inhabitants. Senna and the rest are woken up unexpectedly about 30 years before they are scheduled to arrive in Andromeda. They are met with inexplicable ship system malfunctions and the emergence of a plague affecting a large number of the Ark's inhabitants. It quickly becomes clear that all of this is part of a deliberate plot to sabotage the Ark. So, Sleepwalker Team Blue 7 must act quickly, or the Keelah Si'yah may never reach Andromeda. Annihilation is a gripping story with memorable characters, and it sheds some light on an intriguing question posed at the end of Mass Effect Andromeda. However, some readers will undoubtedly find it more enjoyable than others. So, here are a few considerations for those interested in picking up this novel. The status of the Quarian arc is one of the biggest open plot threads in the Mass Effect series, and it sort of leaves Annihilation in an odd place. The novel revolves around the arc, but offers no answers as to its whereabouts by the time Mass Effect Andromeda takes place. However, it seems highly likely that the next Mass Effect game will touch upon this plot thread in some fashion, and BioWare will almost certainly have to utilize details from Annihilation to tell that story. So, those who are intrigued by this mystery, or who want to be fully up to date on the subject, may want to pick up Annihilation to have a better perspective on where that story may lead if it ever continues. If Mass Effect Andromeda is somehow the only game in the series you've played so far, and you are interested in learning more about the Milky Way races that didn't make it into the game, then I recommend reading Annihilation. I think having read this before a first playthrough of the Mass Effect trilogy would provide a unique experience of the races like the Quarian that could add more depth and perspective to their struggles. Telling the story from the perspectives of the more understated alien races in the Mass Effect universe is one of Annihilation's defining features. It's also one of its greatest strengths. It's so refreshing to experience a story that doesn't focus primarily on humans, and instead centers the narrative on Quarians, Drell, Elcor, Batarian, and Volus characters. Sure, these races appear frequently in the Mass Effect series, but typically always as side characters who rarely get the same attention they're given in Annihilation. This book goes to great lengths to elaborate on the experiences of the non-Council races, which helps paint a new picture of the Milky Way. The practical purpose for this is probably the fact that none of these races appear in Mass Effect Andromeda. Since this book is an Andromeda tie-in, it makes sense to assume that players who get into the series from that game are the target audience for this book. Yet, there is so much here for fans of the trilogy to learn from these characters' backgrounds. The best part about this is that it doesn't feel like reading a codex entry. There is life and emotion behind these moments, which adds a lovely sense of depth to the Mass Effect series as a whole. It's one thing to play through the Quarian missions in Mass Effect 3, but it's another to read Senna's inner thoughts about the Quarian race's mission to find a home, and all the anxieties and complexities of being a part of that culture. Hearing the way Elcor speak is charming in the games, but feeling Yorick's frustration that other races can't grasp the nuance of his natural communication methods changes the way I think about Elcor. Seeing Thane's struggle with Kepral's syndrome is sad, but getting to know the fear of it through Anax's perspective is enlightening. Speaking of, Anax Therion is far and away my favorite character in Annihilation. The concept of a Drell detective is extremely fascinating. A character who can remember the precise details of everything they've experienced is perfect for this type of role. It makes everything we read from her perspective feel much more important, because we know she could remember it later on in the story, which makes us want to take in every detail so we can remember it too. Her thought process is intriguing. The way she narrows down facts and clues to reach her conclusion is fun to be a part of. The way she controls her expressions and demeanor in order to better analyze a suspect evokes a cool feeling of suspense, where the reader tries to anticipate their behavior the way Anax does. All of these aspects merge to create such an engaging reading experience that makes Anax's chapters stand out from the rest. Borbala Ferenc, the ex-matriarch of the Batarian crime family, is another incredibly interesting character. Batarian characters can be rather limited in how they are portrayed across the Mass Effect series, often taking the role of antagonists or otherwise generally aggressive individuals. I really appreciate how Annihilation offers a new take here. On the surface, Borbala leans into all the stereotypes of Batarians, belligerent and crass, quick to embrace violence. However, after Anax gets to know her, Borbala opens up to reveal that she had something better in mind for her race. She wanted to bring about a renaissance of Batarian culture, which meant that they would have to put down their guns and pick up instruments, paintbrushes, or pens instead. This revelation is simply awesome, and what Mass Effect needs more of. It's lovely that these two, Anax and Borbala, develop a relationship by the end of the book. It's one of my favorite parts of Annihilation, even if it is fleeting. It makes me sad that we probably won't ever see or hear from them again, unless they appear in another story about the Keelah Si'yah, or whatever the next Mass Effect game has in store for the Quarian arc. Despite the many elements I enjoyed, I do have some specific issues with Annihilation that made for a bumpy reading experience at times. As much as I love the characters, there are odd moments where many of them feel like they are too human. What I mean by that is that the characters' inner thoughts and self-talk feel like they are humans, rather than a Quarian or an Elcor. For comparison, Nexus Uprising, the first Andromeda tie-in novel, features chapters from the perspectives of Salarian, Turian, and Krogan characters, and each presents an internal world that is influenced by their culture and societal values. In other words, it is very clear that director Jaren Tan says the things he says and thinks the things he thinks as a result of a lifetime spent in Salarian society. Nakmor Kesh's inner thoughts and actions are motivated by being a Krogan. The same can't quite be said of Annihilation's characters, at least not all of them. There are moments that stand out as particularly egregious, especially in chapters from Senna's perspective. At one point, Senna thinks about something the Ancestor VI calls him, Kesed, which he defines as the blind newborn of an animal called a Korak, which is native to Rannoch. This should be a lovely moment where Senna feels connected to his culture and ancestral home, but it's immediately undercut when he goes on to compare the animal to a bighorn sheep, which is native to Earth. It doesn't make sense why Senna would make this comparison. He should be able to enjoy this cultural reference without having to qualify it by comparing it to things humans would know. One could argue that since he's never been to Rannoch, he wouldn't immediately know what a Korak looks like, so he'd have to rely on analogs to form an image in his mind. However, this explanation is debunked in another of Senna's chapters, when he mentions referencing the flotilla's archives to learn things about Rannoch. It's an odd moment that exists purely for the reader's benefit, which ends up taking us out of the story, out of the character's mind, where we should be immersed. We as readers don't need to perfectly imagine what a Korak looks like. That's not really what this moment is about. We need to buy into the sentimentality of the moment. We need to believe that Senna enjoys being called Kesed because it makes him feel closer to his ancestors and Rannoch. There's another small moment in a later Senna chapter that also suffers from the default human perspective. There's a passing line when Senna accepts that the Keelah Si'yah will need to be repaired with the help of the Ancestor VI. Quote, "Senna could not do it. No human could." No human? Is this meant to be taken literally or figuratively? If it's the latter, then why does Senna take on the default human phrasing? Why not use the word Quarian instead? Or, even better, use the word organic, since it fits the thematic tension at that moment. Admittedly, this is a bit of nitpicking, but details like these build up over the chapters, making it more difficult for moments like this to slide. There are a few more really cool things in Annihilation that I couldn't really fit into any larger section, so here's a quick list. Ketsy's unsuited walk throughout the Keelah Si'yah is brilliantly done. The imagery of a Quarian without a suit and singing a lullaby as she walks through the entire arc, healing all those she endangered, is so chilling and darkly beautiful. It was a poignant moment that caps off the story very nicely. The concept of a Hanar cult that believes the descent into chaos is the truest form of peace in the universe is beyond cool. It's also fascinating that the ideology seemed to gain some Volus and Batarian followers. A nihilistic cult of Hanar makes for a humorous image, especially since the underlying philosophy is so bleak. I really enjoy seeing the weirder perspectives and oddities of the Mass Effect universe, and this one may take the top prize. Finally, it would be remiss of me not to mention the cliffhanger at the very end of the book. The transmission that the Keelah Si'yah receives just as Senna goes back into cryostasis is intriguing. It raises so many questions about the status of the Quarian arc, even more than what is posed in Mass Effect Andromeda in my opinion. And it really makes me hope to see this plot thread resolved at some point in the future, either in novels or comics or in the next Mass Effect game. Thanks for watching. If you end up checking out Annihilation, please leave a comment to let me know what you think. And be sure to put appropriate spoiler warnings for your discussion. If you have any questions about the story or characters, comment below and I'll try to answer them or get around to them in a future video. If you liked this video, be on the lookout for my coverage of the other Mass Effect novels and comic books. I also have several theory videos coming, so stay tuned. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.